I'm just going to start off by showing a little bit of, trying to show a little bit of data. This is a very, very averaged and long-term perspective on the income that we earn as New Zealanders. And the New Zealand line obviously is the black one. It runs from 1970 through to almost the present. And what you can see from the line is that relative to the dotted line in the middle, which is the average of the OECD, shorthand the developed countries, we deteriorated quite substantially between 1970, when Britain went into the European Union, until 1990. And since then, we've stayed below the OECD average, and there's quite a gap between where we are and where Australia is. And that gap is around about 20,000 New Zealand dollars per capita. If you look at where we've got economic growth recently, I've oversimplified it a little bit here, but there are 4 areas. We've increased our working hours mainly through labour force participation, and we now have working hours 10% higher than the OECD average. So that's probably not a route for further improvement. We've gained economic benefits from property boom. As you know, I think that's probably not going to be a major source of growth in the future, and the debt levels are high at the moment. Agriculture is a bit of a question mark. Prices may increase again if and when the economy grows and supply constraints emerge in the rest of the world. The world is now down to its lowest food stocks that there's been for a very, very long time. And we may well see the sort of supply constraints on food that we saw a couple of years ago re-emerge. In New Zealand, there's only about 10% of the arable or the agricultural land is unused, and there are some environmental constraints on what we have. So a bit of a question mark on agriculture, also a question mark on tourism. We've got challenges with the emissions and values, and also with local environmental pressures. So if you have a look, I'm not sure quite what's happened to this slide, but along the top there, what the slide shows is the World Economic Forum's approach to thinking about how we get prosperity. And what it says is that you start with competitiveness. Competitiveness leads to productivity, which is the subject here, and productivity leads to prosperity. And they have models that underlie this. If you look at New Zealand's performance against other advanced economies, the thing that is most important in the competitiveness of advanced economies is what they call innovation. And if you then look at the innovation factors, New Zealand's not doing particularly well relative to other advanced economies. And the list of things there, the availability of science and engineers, government procurement of advanced technical products, are all areas that are identified by the World Economic Forum as areas where New Zealand doesn't perform as well as our competitors amongst advanced economies. And then when we look at some of the measures on the right of innovation performance, you see we've got low spend on R&D relative to other advanced economies. We've got slow spending growth on R&D. We write lots of academic papers, but we don't produce very many patents. We don't put a lot of effort into commercialisation, and we end up with slower than target growth of companies that are New Zealand new companies targeting international markets. So if we look at competitiveness, you can see New Zealand on the slide towards the right at the bottom there, just at about 5.2 on competitiveness. The graph looks as if there's not much of a slope there, but if you put a line through that, eyeball a line through there, you'll see the difference between being on the left-hand side and the right-hand side is around about $20,000. Say $20,000 per capita on the left, $40,000 on the right. So that's actually quite a steep slope. And New Zealand is relatively far across on the right on this, but we don't seem to be converting our competitiveness into prosperity. There's something going wrong there. If you look at productivity, you can break productivity up into 2 components simply, labour productivity and all the rest. And this is a chart that compares OECD countries on those two dimensions. And on the left hand, on the vertical axis, we've got hours worked per capita, and you can see there that's the figure where New Zealand's about 10% above the average for the OECD. On the other axis is the output per hour worked. So how much do we actually get for the hours that we're working? And what you can see there, and there's all sorts of disputes about this data, but New Zealand's right over on the left-hand side of that. So if we have an opportunity, it's not going to be to work harder, it's to be more productive for each hour that we're working. I just want to step back a bit then, because there's a big focus on productivity at the moment, and that's been a big challenge for a long time. But what I haven't seen yet, I've seen lots of argument about it, but I haven't seen yet something that provides a clear statement of what the reasons are for that productivity deficit that we have. You know, highlighting the 2 or 3 that are most important. What we have instead is lists of factors, and I'm going to show you a couple of lists of factors, or a long list of factors on a couple of slides in a moment. And we end up with these lists of factors. Somebody will say, well, the problem is this, and therefore the solution is that. And so you end up with a sort of debate about solutions. What we haven't done yet, I think, is got a shared understanding of what the issues are. And the question really is, how do we actually go forward to form that consensus that leads us to act? So, you know, there's lots of plausible hypotheses that are put forward. You know, we've got small scale and distant from markets. We haven't got enough capital investment in our productive assets. Our innovation ecosystem isn't delivering. We've got too much fragmented, low productivity growth service businesses in the economy. Too much of the economy in unproductive cooperatives. We're underweight in minerals relative to Australia. We've got poor infrastructure. I mean, all of these things have some kind of face validity, but, you know, well, which ones are the big ones? There's more. Our talents offshore from the brain drain. We've got a large pool of low-skilled labour. We've got management development and performance management isn't world class. Poor networking and collaboration. We've got a culture that leads people to retire early, in effect, if they're successful, and we don't use IT productivity tools. And I'm sure we could come up with a few more of those, but the issue is, you know, are we going to address all of those, or are we going to home in on the ones that really matter, and which ones are they that really matter? So, my background, really, you know, more than anything else, I'm a strategist, and so I like to think about how you're successful, and strategy is the deployment of resources to achieve a desired goal or goals. And I think at the end of this process, when I say process, I don't mean tonight, but I mean the process of coming to an agreement as a nation about what we're going to do about our productivity challenge, we need to be able to answer 3 questions. First of all, do we actually agree that we understand the causes of our productivity shortfall? Secondly, are the solutions and interventions that we've identified and we've agreed to implement, are they sufficient to close the gap between our performance and our aspirations? We've got a bit of a tendency here to identify a problem, do something small and give it a tick and move on. And then have we actually committed sufficient resource to achieve our goal? And I think unless we can answer those 3 questions, I wouldn't be confident as a strategist that we're going to get the result. At the moment, if somebody said to me, well, what's your call on answering those 3 questions? I think they're pretty much all no for me. So we've got to move those from no's to yes, and I think that's the key challenge. I've said enough.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much indeed.